Hi, my name's Ian and welcome to my channel, and at this point we're sitting and broken the 500 subscribers mark, so thank you for all of you that have subscribed. And no, it's my little channel. Didn't think I would ever get that far, but no, it's good and encouraging for the future. But now we've got another one in our series of reviewing older games, or classic games, or whatever you want to call them. And this time out, we're going to touch on the next iteration of RuneQuest. In the previous RuneQuest video, we covered up to the 3rd edition, Avalon Hill's version of RuneQuest. And in this one, we're going to cover the period of RuneQuest history from 1994 to 2017. And during this, it went through some choppy waters. So we'll pick up this take of this stalwart of the older generation of role-playing games. And we'll finish up showing how this whole period ended up with no less than 4 variants of the game in print to this day. So we've discussed in our previous videos how RuneQuest came to be and how Avalon Hill entered into a relationship with Chaosium to publish the 3rd edition of the game from 1984. As we talked about how that particular relationship went somewhat southwards during the mid-1990s. Following Avalon Hill's tenure with 3rd edition, the game was more or less in this state. Chaosium had the rights to the rules and would continue to use them in its basic role-playing based games. Avalon Hill held the trademark to RuneQuest, and Greg Stafford owned Glorantha. From there, Avalon Hill made 2 stabs at producing a further RuneQuest game. Firstly, in 1994, with a proposed 4th edition that would tie the game back more closely to Glorantha as a world, where 3rd edition had represented more of a generic, non-setting specific game. This fell apart as Stafford refused to let Avalon Hill use Glorantha, being unhappy about how it had been treated during 3rd edition's run. The second attempt was a game called RuneQuest Slayers. I remember receiving a prospectus describing this game at Gen Con UK. This game, however, never saw print, with Hasbro acquiring Avalon Hill in 1998 and subsequently cancelling all of their role-playing game efforts. The game was nearly complete, and as the rights reverted to the authors following its cancellation, you may just be able to find it on the interwebs as Rune Slayers, if you hunt hard enough. Meanwhile, Stafford had formed a company, Mythras, in order to manage Glorantha as a property. This company was originally a subsidiary of Chaosium, but then several key personnel left Chaosium after the financial failure of the Mythras card game, because everyone jumped onto the collectible card game bandwagon at the time. Stafford left and took Mythras, and therefore Glorantha, with him. At Mythras, Stafford and Robin D. Laws worked on another game to bring role-playing life back to Glorantha, named Hero Wars. Apparently the game was originally to be named Hero Quest, but a certain board game by Milton Bradley and Games Workshop already had claim to that name, so Hero Wars it was. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know much about this game, as I've never played it, and read the rules only a couple of times. But the Glorantha source material produced for it, in published form and via Mythras' website, was up to the Stafford's grand standard. The Hero Wars game itself was released in 2000. A few years later, the Hero Quest and the RuneQuest trademark came up for grabs, and Mythras nabbed them both. From 2003, Hero Wars became Hero Quest, just as it was intended. Bearing in mind, up to this point, that there was no official edition of RuneQuest in print. That was about to change in 2006, with Mongoose Publishing, who, to my mind, are the modern Judges Guild. They acquired the license to publish a game under the name of RuneQuest from Mythras. Now, remember that I mentioned that Chaosium retained rights to the RuneQuest rules? Well, here was Mongoose's problem. They had a license to use the RuneQuest name that required them to create a game under the RuneQuest banner that was, for all intents and purposes, recognisable as RuneQuest, but without use or reference to the prior works published by Chaosium and Avalon Hill. The Mongoose team, under Matthew Sprang, made a fair stab, using the open gaming licence to head off any potential challenge from other quarters. See my video on 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons for more on the OGL. With this new Mongoose RuneQuest edition, Mythras gave permission for works on Glorantha and some of the traditional old stomping ground of previous editions, Vikings, Japan, Pirates and so on, were also revisited. Mongoose also acquired licenses to produce material for Moorcock's Eternal Champion series and Lieber's Lankmar series, among others, which they did so using their new RuneQuest edition as a foundation. In 2010, Peter Nash and Lawrence Whitaker overhauled the system to produce RuneQuest 2, or, if you like, Mongoose RuneQuest 2nd edition. After a handful of supplements, including updating the Lankmar material to this new edition, and just over a year of publication, Mythras and Mongoose parted ways in May of 2011. By July of that year, a new company led by Nash and Whitaker called The Design Mechanism entered into a license with Mythras to publish RuneQuest 6. This edition basically took Mongoose RuneQuest 2 and expanded its scope, offering more guidelines and rules to enable a variety of different settings to use the rule set. IQ6 arrived in July 2012, but in the meantime, Mongoose compiled all of their RuneQuest 2 material under the banner Legend. Legend was released and is still in print as a digest-size, defluffed rulebooks under the OGL. Mythras itself was sold to Moon Design Publications in 2013, a company that had been licensed to produce a 2nd edition of HeroQuest in 2009. The shift in licensor between Mythras and Moon Design was absorbed by the Design Mechanism, and so RuneQuest 6 continued on. It is at this point that we return to Chaosium, and I will refer you to my video on Call of Cthulhu. But briefly, Chaosium launched a Kickstarter to produce a 7th edition of the Call of Cthulhu game that didn't quite go to plan. With Chaosium in trouble, both Greg Stafford and Sandy Peterson returned to the company in 2015 and set about a restructuring effort. Part of that restructuring involved absorbing Moon Design. The principals of that company formed the new management at Chaosium, and once more, all of the RuneQuest rights and licenses had returned home. Shortly after this, in 2016, the Design Mechanism lost the license to the RuneQuest name, but they would continue to publish their RuneQuest 6 game under a new name, Mythras. Are you keeping up? If you're counting, that gives us 2 in-print ex-RuneQuest editions still in play, Legend, ex-Mongoose RuneQuest 2, and Mythras, ex-RuneQuest 6, itself an expansion of Mongoose RuneQuest 2. Got that? Cool. On we go. One of the mechanisms Chaosium put in place to help take some of the financial strain off the Cthulhu 7th issue was to create another, less ambitious Kickstarter. This led to the publication of Chaosium's RuneQuest 2nd edition in a nice hardcover, along with many classic supplements as PDF. This injected some much-needed cash into Chaosium and brought us to our 3rd in-print version of the game available today, RuneQuest Classic. Okay, so the nice Kickstarter hardback isn't in print anymore, although it can still be found, but it's all up on DriveThruRPG and Chaosium's site for purchase, so I'm counting it. Finally, with a free Quick Start release in 2017 and a full publication in 2018, Chaosium brought all of the chaos together with the release of RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha. But that game, dear watchers, is a subject for another day. For the play section, I am going to focus on the common foundations of Mongoose RuneQuest 2, from which both Legend and Mythras are built. Characters are constructed using the same characteristics common to RuneQuest over the years, and generated in much the same way: a normal 3 to 18 range for humans, variable ranges for non-humans, attributes calculated from characteristics, Damage modifier, hit points, magic points, movement, and strike rank are all familiar concepts from previous editions, and combat actions, how many things a character can do in a combat round, is new. Fatigue points have gone in favour of a fatigue system. Additionally, Charisma adjusts the number of improvement rolls that a character gains, called experience rolls in Mythras. This assumption is the strong personalities can facilitate their own learning by inspiring teamwork and so on, which I'm not 100% sure about this, but at least it gives the charisma characteristics something useful to do. Skills are split into common and advanced groups, or standard and professional in Mythras. Common skills are those everyone can do to some level. Advanced skills are those you need some training in before they can be used. You gain percentiles in skills through culture and profession choice, and then by spending free skill points to round things out. This gives you a bit more control over your character's starting skills than previous editions of RuneQuest, but does edge the game a little towards character classes, something that I feel is a little out of place within the RuneQuest umbrella. Background options and life event generation are provided, which can add some good hooks in for the referee to feed on. A couple of additional aspects of character creation that I think add to the game in different ways are hero points in Legend and passions in Mythras. Hero points are an aspect of Mongoose RuneQuest 2 and represent those things that draw heroes out from the common crowd: luck, last-ditch efforts, and almost superhuman capabilities. Hero points can be used during play and can also be saved up to purchase heroic abilities. These provide such things as immunity to disease and enhanced combat and other skills and abilities. On the other hand, passions, which were introduced in RuneQuest 6, while hero points and heroic abilities were dropped from that edition, are more a role-playing tool, representing a character's view, how passionate they are, about certain subjects. These can rate loyalty to their family and kingdoms, addiction to substances, attachments to a sword, piousness to a religion, anything else. Basic passions are assigned by culture, but they can be used as a tool to measure any aspect of a character's loves, hatreds, and everything in between. If you wished, you could bring hero points into Mythras, and it would change the feel of the game, edging it more towards the heroic than it otherwise portrays. But the concept of passions is ripe for pulling into any game, as they are handy measures without being mechanically dependent. Actual play is very similar between the two games, and to RuneQuest in general. Skills are percentile based, and both have very similar takes on task difficulty and other skill roll use, if not the same in most cases. Criticals are scored by achieving a roll that is 10% or less than the skill's percentile. Fumbles are suffered if the roll is 99 to 100, if the skill percentile is 100 or less, and 100 if the skill percentile is greater than 100. Combat is very similar, with the obligatory terminology changes, combat maneuvers versus special effects, for example. The basis of combat is that characters expend combat actions to attack and or parry, making skill checks to do so, and the difference between opposing skill checks, e.g. attacking versus parrying or dodging, determines how many special maneuvers can be applied by which combatant. These are like critical hits. They give combatants more tactical options, greater effect for their blows, imposed penalties to their opponents, manoeuvrability, and so on. They make combat more colourful and extend the idea of impaling from previous RuneQuest. Magic carries on the basic RuneQuest concept of magic as a skill, and spells are fueled by magic points. Some more differences in terminology here, with common magic versus folk magic, spirit magic versus animism, and divine magic versus theism. Both possess sorcery, and Legend covers runes, while Mythras covers mysticism. Mythras provides a greater degree of customization, but both systems are essentially on similar grounds. And that's about it. Both Legend and Mythras, and their forebears Mongoose RuneQuest 2 and RuneQuest 6, are very much relatable and feel like generic D100 systems. To really make them breathe, a referee must add a reasonably detailed setting. Obviously, RuneQuest was originally constructed to describe a detailed setting in game terms, but all editions of RuneQuest truly shine when the referee has done his legwork. So from a play point of view, Legend and Mythras provide a reasonably detailed, not overly complex set of rules that can mesh with a referee setting to present an immersive game to its players. There is nothing in either that is complex, although the usual caveats of familiarity apply. If you're coming to any version of RuneQuest from, say, Dungeons & Dragons, you might find yourself wondering where all the classes and levels are at for a bit. For review purposes, I will treat Legend and Mythras separately, and focus more on their presentation than on the rules. We've discussed the rules, and the basic differences between the games in the in-play section, so I won't elaborate more here. Dealing with Legend first, with some minor revision and some extraction of elements that could be perceived as IP belonging to someone other than Mongoose, Legend is Mongoose RuneQuest 2. The books are digest size and limited in artwork. Necessarily so, since the core rulebook, for instance, is cutting the 190-odd full-size pages of rules from the RuneQuest 2 rulebook into a little over 234 half-size pages. The rules are solid, benefiting from half a decade of feedback and development during Mongoose's tenure with the RuneQuest license. Lacking in the core rulebook is an index, and some of the editing and formatting does seem to tell a tale of hasty work to get the book to market. Indices are fairly work-intensive, and are often the first things to go when time is of the essence. As you can see, I've managed to overcome this lack of reference with judicial use of post-it notes, which makes the book more usable during play and referee prep. Otherwise, there's a lot of unnecessary hunting to do that an index would have eliminated. The supplemental volumes do similar. Take the original RuneQuest 2 content, strip out anything that could land Mongoose in hot water, and reformat to digest size. And again, as with the core book, strip back the art and lose any index the original work may have had. The major advantage, if you are that way inclined, is that Legend is the only derivative of RuneQuest that falls fully under the banner of the Open Game License. So if you're looking for a toolkit, no-frills set of rulebooks that you can use to build settings and systems for publication, then Legend is a pretty good foundation. So, rules, good, execution, fair, layout, mediocre. Moving on to Mythras, the core book is a hardbook volume which uses the same artwork as RuneQuest 6, which is itself a derivative from the cover art from the original editions of RuneQuest. Essentially, Mythras is RuneQuest 6, with, as Mongoose did for Legend, anything potentially an IP minefield removed or reworked. The core book is better laid out than Legend, with full art and an index. Like Legend, Mythras is a toolkit of a game, and the book presents plenty of examples and hints as to how to use the tools it provides to build your own settings. Mythras is not OGL, however, so you'd have to approach the design mechanism if you wanted to publish anything based on it. Mythras does have a light version called Mythras Imperative, which is also not OGL, but the design mechanism have created something that they call the Gateway License to enable creators to build their own products based on this cut-down rule set. The catch is that such products must go through a vetting by the design mechanism as part of the license's requirements. Of the two, Mythras is the strongest contender to pick up and play as a game in and of itself, while Legend requires a little more referee legwork. With very little tweaking, supplements produced for Legend, Mythras, Mongoose, RuneQuest 2 and RuneQuest 6 are compatible with each other. You just have to mind the few requirements made in RuneQuest 6 and Mythras over RuneQuest 2 and Legend, and the differences in terminology. In some ways, I prefer Legend and Mythras over RuneQuest 3rd edition. The original quest by Mongoose to produce a game that felt like RuneQuest without treading on Chaosium's toes succeeded. Perhaps not so well on the first effort, but definitely with the second. And from the point of view of one of my favourite literary settings ever, the Lankmar books Mongoose published for their first and second editions are absolutely usable with both Legend and Mythras. And they fit the feel of the place better than any of the class and level-based games that have attempted it. Although, if you are heading into Lankmar, whatever rules you are using, I'd still recommend picking up the TSR Dungeons & Dragons books for it, as excellent reference works. For Legend, several digest-sized volumes are available. The essentials for the game are the Legend Core Rulebook. That contains everything that you need to play the game. But I would also add Arms of Legend and Monsters of Legend to the list of essentials. There are a number of additional supplements and settings, basically everything that wasn't tied to a specific license that was published for RuneQuest 2, including Vikings, Samurai, Pirates, Gladiators and more. The Deus Vult volumes and the Stone Age setting of Land of Ice and Stone are also interesting. For Mythras, the Mythras Core Rules has everything you need. If you want to give the system a try first, then the basic game is provided by the Mythras Imperative, which can be downloaded for free from the Design Mechanisms website. A standalone game, Classic Fantasy, brings a sort of hybrid child of Mythras and Dungeons and Dragons together, which may or may not be to your taste. From my own perspective, it's a bit pointless and not particularly executed well, but your mileage may vary. The Design Mechanism also published supplements and settings of various sorts, notably the Mythic Earth series, which includes Mythic Rome and, one of my favourites, Mythic Britain. Mongoose missed the mark a little with their first RuneQuest edition, but improved this effort by a margin or 3 in their second edition. The further refinements that RuneQuest 6 brought really did enhance this particular branch of the venerable RuneQuest family. With Legend and Mythras still in print today, they are well worth taking a look at, especially if you are a referee that likes to tinker and build. So that's our review of the Mongoose versions of RuneQuest and their offspring. Now, at the beginning we said there were 4 versions of RuneQuest still in print, or currently in print, and those the full set is Legend and Mythras and Classic RuneQuest and, of course, RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha. We'll cover that, the current edition of RuneQuest Adventures in Glorantha, at a later point. So thank you for listening, and please, if you like all of this, like, subscribe, comment, and all of that stuff. What I have got in the works that will be next is my top 10 tools for referees, games masters, whatever you want to call them, and then after that we will delve more into some of the other games. I would like to do a discussion of Judge Dredd in role-playing media. More on the and Goodman's Classic Adventures Reincarnated. A review of Tegel Manor. And, well, just continuation of all our various other games over the years in their history and where they are at now. So, like I said, thank you for listening, watching, whatever you are actually doing. Have a great day, and catch you next time.